An infertile millionaire helped a divorced pregnant woman in need of surgery and fell in love with her. Hello, my beautiful and irreplaceable family. Welcome home to Mr. Peter Stories. Each time I sit to tell a story, I feel your hearts listening. You're not just numbers, your souls connected with mine. Your support is the warmth in my cold days. Your comments are the whispers that keep me going. You are deeply, truly, endlessly loved. To our new family members, I don't just welcome you, I embrace you. You didn't find this channel by accident. You were meant to be here, to feel safe, understood and loved. And I promise, I will never let your trust go to waste. Some hearts are made to heal each other and some families are chosen, not born. My dear ones, please don't wait for me to remind you. When you like and comment, you're not helping numbers, you're helping a family grow stronger. And when you type, "I am here," you remind me that this love is real. To my Day One supporters, please share in the comments what this space has meant to you. Let our new family members feel the magic you've helped create. Now, come with me into today's story, crafted with nothing but love for you. The rain hammered against the windows of the Bentley Continental like bullets from heaven, each drop exploding into fractals of light against the tinted glass. Damek Mace sat motionless in the driver's seat, his hands gripping the Italian leather steering wheel until his knuckles turned white as marble. The engine hummed quietly, a mechanical heartbeat in the storm, but he couldn't bring himself to turn the key. Not yet. Not when the words of Dr. Richardson still echoed in his skull like church bells tolling for the dead. Severely compromised sperm count. Extremely low chance of natural conception without medical intervention. I'm sorry, Mr. Mace, but the damage from your childhood illness appears to have significantly impacted your fertility. 35 years old. Master of a billion-dollar empire spanning luxury hotels from Dubai to Manhattan. Tech companies that moved markets with a single press release, real estate portfolios that could buy small countries. Yet he couldn't create the one thing that mattered more than all his accumulated wealth combined: a child. The fertility clinic's neon sign reflected in his rearview mirror, casting pink and blue shadows across his chiseled features. Even in devastation, Damek Mace was beautiful in the way that old masters painted angels. All sharp cheekbones and storm-grey eyes, dark hair swept back from a face that had graced magazine covers when he'd been named one of America's most eligible bachelors. That title felt like mockery now. His phone buzzed against the console. Camilla, his wife of 3 years, the former Miss Connecticut who'd swept into his life with golden hair and calculated smiles. She'd be at their Beacon Hill mansion now, probably selecting wine for another charity function where she'd spend his money and bask in the social credit of his success. The thought of telling her about Dr. Richardson's diagnosis made his stomach twist like rope. He'd married Camilla, believing she wanted the same things he did. A family, children laughing in their 15-room mansion, tiny feet running through. Gardens his mother had planted before cancer took her when he was 12. But lately, he'd begun to suspect that Camilla's interest in children extended only as far as their potential to secure her position as his heir's mother. The realization that there might never be an heir would either devastate her and this thought chilled him more than the October storm. Relieve her. Thunder cracked overhead like splintering wood. Damek finally turned the ignition, needing to move, needing to escape the suffocating weight of his new reality. The Bentley purred to life, and he pulled onto Newbury Street, Boston's slick arteries flowing with late evening traffic. Normally, he'd head straight home to Beacon Hill, to the mansion that had been featured in Architectural Digest twice, to the wife who posed perfectly in every photograph, but felt increasingly like a stranger sharing his bed. Instead, he drove, past the brownstones of Back Bay, through the neon wilderness of downtown, into neighborhoods where his wealth couldn't shield him from the raw honesty of human struggle. The rain seemed to wash the city clean, revealing its true colors beneath. The veneer of civilization. Streetlights became halos in the storm, and every reflection in the wet asphalt looked like tears. His phone rang again. This time, he glanced at the screen. Camilla. Home. He let it go to voicemail, then listened. To her voice, crystalline and cold as winter champagne. "Darling, the Worthingtons are here for dinner. Where are you? This is embarrassing." Not worried, not concerned for his well-being, embarrassed. Damek pulled over on a side street in Jamaica Plain, a neighborhood his society friends would never venture into, and sat listening to the rain drum against the roof. Through the passenger window, he could see a small medical clinic, its windows glowing warm and yellow against the storm. A hand-painted sign read, "Community Care Center, 24 hours." It looked nothing like the sterile marble and crystal, a palace where he'd just received his life-altering news. This place had heart, had soul, had the kind of authenticity his world had forgotten existed. That's when he saw her. A figure stumbled from the clinic's entrance, moving with the awkward, desperate gait of someone in pain, even through the rain and darkness, even doubled over and struggling. She was breathtaking. Her skin was the color of caramel and starlight, her natural curls wild and beautiful in the storm. She wore scrubs, a nurse, he realized, but they were soaked through and clinging to a body that was clearly heavily pregnant. She took 3 steps before her knees buckled. Damek was out of the Bentley before conscious thought took hold. His expensive shoes splashing through puddles as he ran toward her. His $1,000 suit was instantly soaked, but forgotten. She was on her hands and knees on the sidewalk, gasping, one hand pressed to her swollen belly while the other clutched the concrete. "Hey, it's okay," he said, dropping beside her without caring about the water soaking through his pants. Up close, she was even more stunning. Features that belonged in Renaissance paintings, eyes like liquid amber that held pain and fear and a strength that took his breath away. "What's happening? Are you hurt?" She looked up at him, water streaming down her face, and he saw the exact moment she registered his appearance. The expensive clothes, the watch that cost more than most people's cars, the kind of masculine appeal that usually made women stammer. But she didn't stammer. If anything, her walls went up higher. "I'm fine," she gasped, clearly lying. Just need a minute." Another contraction hit her, because that's what this was, he realized with crystal clarity. She was in labor, her back arched, and a sound escaped her that was part pain, part terror, part something primal and fierce that spoke to every protective instinct he'd never known he possessed. "You're having the baby," he said, stating the obvious because his brain seemed to have short-circuited. "Right now, we need to get you to a hospital." "Can't afford," she started, then bit off the words, pride warring with desperation in her beautiful face. "The clinic was supposed to, but they don't do deliveries here. I was trying to get to Mass General, but the contractions..." Another wave hit her, stronger this time. She squeezed her eyes shut, and Damek watched a single tear escape to mingle with the rain on her cheek. In that moment, something fundamental shifted inside his chest, like tectonic plates rearranging themselves around his heart. "I'm taking you to Mass General," he said, scooping her up before she could protest. She was lighter than he'd expected, all baby and determination, her body trembling against his chest. "My name is Damek. What's yours?" "Serena," she whispered, then louder, with more strength. "Serena Edwin, you don't have to. I can't pay you back for this." He carried her to the Bentley, rain streaming down both their faces, and something about the way she fit in his arms felt like coming home to a place he'd never been. "Nobody's asking you to," he said, settling her gently in the passenger seat. The leather would be ruined, but he couldn't have cared less. As he started the engine and pulled into traffic, Serena gripped the door handle through another contraction. "Why are you helping me?" she asked when she could speak again. "You don't even know me." Damek glanced at her profile. at the way the streetlights played across her face and realized he couldn't explain it in any way that would make sense. How could he tell her that an hour ago he'd learned he might never be a father, and now here she was, bringing life into the world in his car, trusting him with the most vulnerable moment of her existence? Maybe, he said quietly, navigating through the storm-dark streets toward the hospital. We're both exactly where we're supposed to be. Thunder rolled overhead like applause from heaven, and neither of them spoke again until they reached Mass General, where everything would change forever. Chapter 2. The Birth of Miracles. Massachusetts General Hospital rose from the Boston night like a beacon of hope and healing, its windows glowing against the storm-dark sky. Damek pulled the Bentley up to the emergency entrance with the kind of controlled urgency that came from a lifetime of making critical decisions under pressure. The rain had softened to a steady whisper, as if even the weather was holding its breath for what was about to unfold. Serena's contractions were coming. Faster now, each one stealing her breath and painting her beautiful face with shades of determination and fear. She'd gone quiet during the 10-minute drive, her hands pressed against her swollen belly, her amber eyes focused inward on the ancient dance between mother and child that was beginning its final movements. "We're here," Damek said gently, pulling up to the emergency bay. Before she could protest or insist she could walk, he was around the car and lifting her from the passenger seat. She felt different in his arms now, not just the weight of her pregnancy, but something indefinable, as if the shared intensity of their mad dash through the storm had created a connection between them that transcended the boundaries of strangers. The automatic doors whooshed open, and suddenly they were in the bright antiseptic world of the hospital. A nurse at the triage desk looked up from her computer, took one look at Serena's condition, and immediately called for a wheelchair and an obstetrics team. "How far apart are the contractions?" the nurse asked efficiently, helping Serena into the wheelchair while Damek hovered nearby, unsure of his role but unwilling to leave. 2 minutes, Serena gasped. "Maybe less. I think the babies are coming now." "Babies," the nurse repeated, eyebrows raising. "Plural?" "Twins," Serena confirmed, and Damek felt something flutter in his chest that was part excitement, part terror, and entirely overwhelming. Twins, 2 lives about to enter the world, and somehow he was here to witness it. They wheeled Serena toward the elevator, and Damek found himself following, his expensive shoes squeaking on the linoleum floor. The nurse glanced at him questioningly. Serena started, then seemed to realize she didn't know how to finish that sentence. He wasn't her husband, wasn't the father, wasn't even someone she'd known an hour ago. But he was here, and in this moment, that seemed to be enough. "He brought me here." "Are you the father?" Dr. Chen, the on-call obstetrician, asked Damek directly as they reached the maternity ward. "No," Damek said quietly. "Just a friend who was in the right place at the right time." Dr. Chen nodded, already focused on Serena's medical needs. "We'll need to get you into a delivery room immediately. These babies aren't waiting for anyone." What followed was a blur of controlled chaos. Nurses appearing with equipment, monitors being attached, Serena being helped into a hospital gown, while Damek waited outside in the hallway, pacing like an expectant father, despite having no right to the title. Through the partially open door, he could hear Dr. Chen's calm, professional voice guiding. "Serena, through the process. First baby is crowning. This is it, Serena. Big push on the next contraction." Damek found himself holding his breath, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. He'd negotiated million-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, had given presentations to boardrooms full of hostile investors with perfect composure, but waiting in this hospital hallway while a woman he barely knew brought new life into the world was undoing him completely. A cry split the air, high, clear, and utterly perfect. The sound of a baby taking its first breath, announcing its arrival to the universe with indignant surprise. "It's a girl!" Dr. Chen announced, and Damek felt tears he hadn't expected spring to his eyes. Beautiful, healthy girl. But we're not done yet. Baby number 2 is right behind. Through the door, he could hear Serena's exhausted laughter. A sound like music and sunlight and everything beautiful in the world condensed into pure joy. "Luna," she whispered. "Her name is Luna." 3 minutes later, another cry joined the first, deeper, stronger, a sound that seemed to shake the very foundations of the hospital. "And we have a boy! Perfect, healthy boy! Congratulations, Mama, you did incredible!" "Kai," Serena said, her voice thick with tears and wonder. "His name is Kai, Luna and Kai, moon and ocean, perfect names for perfect babies born in the middle of a storm to a woman who was stronger than anyone had a right to be." A nurse emerged from the delivery room, smiling. "They're doing beautifully. Mom and babies are healthy. Would you like to meet them?" Damek hesitated. He had no right to intrude on this most intimate of moments, no claim to these first precious minutes of new life. But something in Serena's voice called out to him. "Damek, are you still there? I'd like you to meet them." He entered the delivery room on unsteady legs, and the sight that greeted him rewrote every definition of beauty he'd ever known. Serena lay propped against pillows, her dark hair spread like a halo around her face, her skin glowing with the ethereal radiance that seemed to surround new mothers. In her arms, she held 2 tiny bundles, one wrapped in pink, one in blue. Luna was delicate as spun glass, with skin like café au lait and a rosebud mouth that seemed designed for smiling. Her eyes, when they fluttered open, were already alert and curious, as if she was taking inventory of this new world she'd been born. Into Kai was bigger, more solid, with his mother's caramel skin and tiny fists that seemed ready to take on the world. Even at minutes old, there was something determined about him, something that spoke of strength and stubbornness and the kind of courage that ran in his mama's veins. "They're perfect," Damek whispered, his voice rough with emotion he couldn't name. "Absolutely perfect." Serena looked up at him, and in her amber eyes he saw exhaustion and joy and something that might have been gratitude. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been there." "You would have found a way," he said with absolute certainty. "You're stronger than you know." She laughed softly, adjusting Luna's blanket with practiced ease, despite having been a mother for less than 10 minutes. "I don't feel strong, I feel terrified. These 2 perfect little humans are depending on me, and I don't have a job, don't have a home, don't have anything to offer them except love." The words hit Damek like a physical blow. In all his years of privilege and wealth, he'd never truly understood what it meant to love someone so completely that you'd give everything for them while having nothing to give. But he saw it now in Serena's face. The fierce, protective love of a mother who would move mountains for her children if she had to. "Where's their father?" he asked gently. Serena's expression hardened, and for a moment she looked dangerous. "Knox abandoned us when he found out I was pregnant. Took money from his new girlfriend and disappeared. Said he wasn't ready to be tied down by complications." She looked down at her babies, her voice softening. "His loss. These aren't complications. They're miracles." Something cold and sharp twisted in Damek's chest at the thought of any man walking away from this, from Serena's strength and beauty, from these perfect children who deserved every good thing the world had to offer. Knox, whoever he was a fool and a coward. "What will you do now?" Damek asked. Serena was quiet for a long moment, gently rocking Luna, while Kai slept peacefully in the crook of her other arm. "I don't know," she admitted. "I was working as a nurse at the clinic, but they can't hold my job forever. My apartment, I had to give it up last month when I couldn't work anymore. I've been staying at a shelter, but they don't allow infants." Her voice cracked slightly. "I'll figure something out, I have to." Damek felt something shift inside his chest, like puzzle pieces clicking into place. An hour ago, he'd been drowning, in the knowledge that he might never be a father. Now here was a woman who needed help, who had two perfect children, who deserved every opportunity in the world. It wasn't charity. It was something deeper, something that felt like destiny. Reaching out with both hands. "I have a proposition," he said carefully. "I own an estate in Beacon Hill. There's a cottage on the property, beautiful, private, with its own garden. I need someone to manage the grounds, handle correspondence, that kind of thing. It comes with housing, full benefits, and a salary that would let you take care of your children without worrying about money." Serena stared at him as if he'd just offered to give her the moon. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do that for a stranger?" Damek looked at Luna and Kai, sleeping peacefully in their mother's arms, and felt his heart break open in the most beautiful way possible. "Maybe we're not strangers," he said quietly. "Maybe we're just people who found each other exactly when we needed to." Outside the hospital windows, the storm was finally beginning to clear, and the first hints of dawn were painting the sky in shades of hope and possibility. Inside the delivery room, 3 adults and 2 babies sat in comfortable silence, all of them somehow knowing that everything had just changed forever. "I accept," Serena said finally, her voice strong and clear. "But I want to be clear. This is a business arrangement. I'll work for what you're giving me. I won't be anyone's charity case." Damek smiled, the first genuine smile he'd felt in months. "I wouldn't dream of it," he said. "Welcome to the family, Serena Edwin." And as Luna opened her tiny eyes and seemed to look directly at him, Damek Mace realized that sometimes the most beautiful miracles came disguised as storms. Chapter 3. The Garden of Second Chances. 2 weeks after the twins' dramatic entrance into the world, Damek's Bentley wound its way through the tree-lined streets of Beacon Hill, carrying precious cargo. In the back seat, Serena held Luna and Kai in matching car seats that had appeared in the hospital room the day after their birth. Top-rated safety models that prioritized protection above all else. She'd protested, of course, but Damek had simply said, "The safest for the most precious," and somehow that had ended the argument. Now, as they turned through wrought iron gates that opened at the touch of a remote, Serena felt her breath catch in her throat. The estate unfolded before them like something from a storybook. 15 acres of manicured perfection nestled in the heart of one of Boston's most exclusive neighborhoods. Ancient oak trees lined the cobblestone drive, their branches forming a cathedral of green overhead, while meticulously maintained gardens stretched as far as the eye could see. The main house was a masterpiece of federal architecture, all red brick and white columns with ivy climbing its walls like nature's own decorative flourish. But it was the smaller building nestled among the rose gardens that made Serena's heart skip a beat. The cottage looked like it had been transplanted from the English countryside. Honey-colored stone walls, diamond-paned windows that caught the afternoon sunlight, and a roof of weathered slate that spoke of centuries rather than decades. "That's yours," Damek said simply, following her gaze. "The cottage has been empty for too long. It needs a family to bring it back to life." Serena shifted Luna to her other arm, trying to process the reality of what she was seeing. The cottage alone was larger than any place she'd ever lived, and it sat in gardens that belonged in magazines, surrounded by the kind of beauty that most people only dreamed of. "Damek," she said carefully, "this is too much. I can't possibly accept." "You can and you will," he interrupted, but gently. Serena, I've been rattling around that big house alone for 3 years. Having you and the babies here isn't charity, it's sanity. You're giving me far more than I'm giving you. He parked the Bentley in front of the cottage, and as if summoned by magic, a woman in her 60s appeared from around the corner. She had silver hair pulled back in an elegant chignon, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and the sort of competent warmth that immediately put people at ease. "Mrs. Whitmore," Dumek said, stepping out to greet her. "Perfect timing, as always." "Mr. Mace," she replied with a smile that spoke of years of mutual respect and affection. "I've been so looking forward to meeting our new residents." Serena emerged from the car more slowly, still adjusting to moving with 2 infants and a body that was healing from childbirth. Mrs. Whitmore immediately stepped forward. Not to help with the babies, she was too wise for that presumption, but simply to offer her presence as support. "You must be Serena," she said warmly. "I'm Eleanor Whitmore, the estate manager. I've prepared the cottage for your arrival, though I suspect you'll want to make your own adjustments once you've settled in. Mrs. Whitmore has been running this place since before I bought it," Dumek explained, lifting the car seats from the vehicle with practiced ease. "She knows every inch of the property better than I do. If you need anything at all, she's your first call." The cottage's front door was painted deep forest green, with a brass knocker shaped like a rose, and window boxes overflowing with late-season flowers. Mrs. Whitmore produced an old-fashioned skeleton key from her pocket and unlocked the door with a satisfying click. The interior took Serena's breath away. The main room was spacious but cozy, with exposed wooden beams across the ceiling and a stone fireplace that dominated one wall. Comfortable furniture in soft blues and creams invited relaxation, while built-in bookshelves spoke of quiet evenings and good literature. Everything was perfectly clean but lived in, as if the cottage had been waiting patiently for the right family to call it home. "The kitchen is fully stocked," Mrs. Whitmore was saying, leading them through an archway into a room that belonged in a cooking magazine. White cabinets with glass fronts, butcher block countertops, a farmhouse sink beneath a window that looked out onto the rose garden. "I took the liberty of including some basics for the babies as well. Formula, diapers, that sort of thing. Just until you have a chance to get your bearings." Serena set Luna's carrier on the kitchen island and turned in a slow circle, trying to absorb the reality of her new life. "This is incredible," she whispered. "I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Dumek said with a grin that transformed his usually serious face into something boyish and beautiful. "Wait until you see the rest." The cottage had 3 bedrooms upstairs, a master suite with its own bathroom and a view of the gardens, and 2 smaller rooms that Mrs. Whitmore had already begun converting into nurseries. The walls were painted in soft yellows and greens, perfect for babies of any gender, and new cribs sat waiting in each room. "I thought the twins might like their own spaces as they grow," Mrs. Whitmore explained. "But for now, they can both stay in your room if you prefer." Serena found herself blinking back tears as she looked at the cribs, at the rocking chair positioned perfectly to catch the morning light, at the changing table stocked with everything 2 babies could possibly need. It was more than she'd ever dared to dream for her children, more than she'd ever had herself. "Why?" she asked Dumek, who was leaning in the doorway watching her reaction. "Why are you doing all this?" He was quiet for a long moment, his grey eyes thoughtful. "Do you believe in fate, Serena?" She considered the question seriously. "I believe in hard work and making your own luck, but lately..." She looked down at Luna, who was awake and staring at the sunlight streaming through the window. "Lately, I'm starting to think maybe there's something more." 2 weeks ago, I got the worst news of my life, Dumek said quietly. "I learned that I might never be able to have children of my own. I drove through a storm, thinking my life was over, and then I found you, two perfect babies coming into the world, a mother who would do anything for them, and somehow I got to be part of that. Miracle. He stepped into the room, approaching slowly as if afraid to intrude. Maybe we were meant to find each other. Maybe this is exactly where we're all supposed to be. Before Serena could respond, Kai began to fuss in his carrier downstairs. The sound seemed to break the spell of the moment, bringing them back to the practical realities of caring for newborns. I should feed them, Serena said, suddenly shy in the face of Damek's intensity. Of course. Mrs. Whitmore stocked the kitchen. With everything you should need. I'll let you get settled. But as he moved toward the door, Serena found herself calling after him. Damek, would you like to stay? For dinner, I mean. I could cook something as a way of saying thank you. The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise. I'd love that, but only if you let me help. I may be useless with babies, but I make a mean pasta primavera. And so, as the afternoon melted into evening, they found themselves in the cottage kitchen together, Damek chopping vegetables with the precision of someone who'd learned to cook for himself, while Serena moved between feeding the twins and seasoning the sauce. It was domestic and comfortable in a way that neither of them had expected, as if they were pieces of the same puzzle finally clicking into place. Mrs. Whitmore had discreetly disappeared after ensuring they had everything they needed, leaving them to discover the rhythm of their new arrangement. Luna and Kai seemed to approve of their surroundings, sleeping peacefully in their carriers, while their mother and the man who'd saved them all learned to navigate the strange intimacy of sharing space and creating a meal together. Tell me about your family, Damek said as they sat down to eat at the small dining table overlooking the garden. Serena was quiet for a moment, twirling pasta around her fork. There isn't much to tell. My grandmother raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 8. She was Persian, full of stories and poetry and wisdom about making the best of whatever life handed you. She taught me that love isn't about what you have to give. It's about what you're willing to sacrifice. She sounds remarkable. She was. She died when I was in nursing school, left me her jewelry and her books of poetry and the absolute certainty that I could handle whatever came next. Serena smiled softly. I think she would have loved this place. She always said that gardens were where God practiced making beautiful things. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. The only sounds, the soft breathing of sleeping babies and the distant murmur of evening settling over the gardens. As darkness fell, lights came on automatically throughout the grounds, transforming the view outside into something magical. What about you? Serena asked eventually. Your family? Damek's expression grew shadowed. My mother died when I was 12, cancer. My father never really recovered. He threw himself into work and left me to raise myself mostly. When he died 5 years ago, I inherited everything, including a marriage to a woman who wanted the lifestyle more than the man. Camilla, Serena said, remembering the name from their conversation at the hospital. Camilla, he confirmed. We married because it made sense on paper. Two attractive people from good families, combining resources and social connections. I thought I could learn to love her, or at least build something real with her. But she's cold, beautiful and perfect and utterly cold. I'm sorry, Serena said and meant it. That must be lonely. Damek looked at her across the small table, candlelight flickering between them, two babies sleeping peacefully nearby, and felt something shift in his chest. It was, he said quietly, until now. The words hung in the air between them, heavy, with meaning and possibility. Serena felt her cheeks warm, felt the dangerous flutter of attraction that she'd been trying to ignore since that first night in the storm. Damek, she said carefully, I need you to know that I can't be someone's consolation prize. I won't be the rebound from a bad marriage, or the charity case who's grateful enough to offer whatever you want in return for this kindness? He leaned forward, his grey eyes intense and sincere. I would never ask that of you. What I'm offering is exactly what I said. A job, a home, a chance for your children to grow up somewhere safe and beautiful. Nothing more, nothing less. What happens beyond that? He paused, choosing his words carefully. What happens beyond that is up to us to decide if and when we're both ready. Serena studied his face in the candlelight, looking for signs of deception or manipulation, but all she saw was honesty and something that might have been hope. Okay, she said finally. We'll see what happens. As if in agreement, Luna chose that moment to wake up and announce her need for attention with a healthy cry. The spell of the evening was broken, but not destroyed, simply transformed into something more real, more sustainable. Damek helped clear the dishes while Serena tended to the babies, and when it was time for him to return to the main house, he kissed her forehead gently, like a benediction. "Welcome home, Serena," he whispered. And for the first time in her adult life, she actually felt like she was. Chapter 4. Dancing in Starlight. 8 months had passed since Serena and the twins had made the cottage their home, and autumn was painting the estate in shades of gold and crimson that took her breath away. Every morning, Luna and Kai had grown from tiny bundles into actual little people. Luna with her contemplative amber eyes and delicate features, Kai with his determined jaw and sturdy limbs that promised he'd be tall like his mother. They were crawling everywhere now and pulling themselves up on furniture, with Kai taking his first tentative steps just last week. Their development had given Serena something she hadn't had since their birth: time to think, to breathe, to remember she was more than just mama. The work arrangement had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Serena managed Damek's correspondence, coordinated with the gardening staff, and handled the endless details that came with maintaining a property like theirs. It was work that challenged her mind without overwhelming her schedule, allowing her to be present for her children while contributing meaningfully to the household. But it was the unplanned moments that had become the most precious part of her days. Like discovering that Damek played piano. She'd first heard the music on a sleepless night in late October when Kai was teething and refusing to settle. The sound had drifted across the gardens from the main house, something classical and heartbreakingly beautiful that seemed to capture all the longing and sorrow she'd glimpsed in Damek's grey eyes. Night after night, she'd found herself standing at her bedroom window, Luna or Kai in her arms, listening to him pour his soul into the keys. Tonight was different. Tonight, both babies were sleeping peacefully, and Serena found herself drawn not just to her window, but across the moonlit gardens toward the source of the music. The main house was mostly dark, except for the music room on the first floor, where soft light spilled through tall windows onto the terrace. Serena approached quietly, not wanting to intrude, but unable to resist the pull of the melody. Through the glass, she could see Damek at a grand piano that looked like it belonged in a concert hall, his profile illuminated by the warm glow of a single lamp. He was playing Chopin. She recognized the piece from her grandmother's old records, but there was something raw and personal in his interpretation that made it sound like he was composing it as he went along. His eyes were closed, his dark hair falling across his forehead, and there was a vulnerability in his posture that she'd never seen during their daytime interactions. This was Damek without his armor, without the careful control he maintained in his business dealings and social obligations. This was the man who'd carried her through a storm, who'd given her children a fairy tale home, who'd somehow become essential to her daily happiness without either of them acknowledging what was happening between them. As the final notes faded into silence, Serena found herself knocking softly on the French doors that led from the terrace into the music room. Damek looked up, startled. and for a moment she saw him completely unguarded, surprised, pleased, and something deeper that made her pulse quicken. He was wearing dark jeans and a charcoal cashmere sweater that clung to his shoulders in ways that reminded her he was more than just her employer, more than just the kind man who'd saved her and her children. "Serena," he said, rising from the piano bench and crossing to unlock the doors. "Is everything all right? The babies?" "They're sleeping," she assured him, suddenly aware that she was standing in his garden at nearly midnight wearing nothing but pajama pants and a silk camisole, her hair loose around her shoulders. She'd grabbed a cardigan on her way out, but the October air was cool enough to raise goosebumps on her arms. "I heard you playing and I couldn't resist listening. I hope that's okay." "More than okay," he said, stepping aside to let her enter the music room. "I had no idea anyone could hear me from the cottage. Sound carries beautifully across the gardens," she said, looking around the room with wonder. The space was masculine but elegant, with built-in bookshelves, leather furniture, and that magnificent Steinway piano dominating the center. "This room is incredible. Do you play often?" "When I can't sleep," he admitted, closing the doors behind her. "Which is most nights lately. I'm sorry if I've been keeping you awake." "Don't apologize," Serena said quickly. "It's beautiful. Sad sometimes, but beautiful. You play like someone who's trying to work something out." Damek was quiet for a moment, studying her face in the lamplight. "What am I trying to work out?" The question was soft, intimate, and Serena felt the shift in the air between them, the acknowledgement of something they'd been carefully dancing around for months. "I think," she said carefully, "you're trying to figure out how to be happy." "And what's your diagnosis, Dr. Edwin?" She smiled at the gentle teasing in his voice. "Play something hopeful," she said, echoing words from a dream she'd had but never spoken aloud. "Play something that sounds like tomorrow instead of yesterday." Damek returned to the piano bench, but instead of playing, he patted the space beside him. "Sit with me," he said. "I'll play better with company." Serena hesitated for only a moment before crossing the room and settling beside him on the bench. The space was intimate, their thighs brushing, his warmth radiating through the cashmere of his sweater. She could smell his cologne, something subtle and expensive that spoke of cedar and rain, and feel the careful control in the way he held himself so close to her. "What would you like to hear?" he asked, his fingers poised over the keys. "Something that makes you smile," she said. "Something that reminds you why beautiful things exist." Damek began to play, and this time the music was different, lighter, more playful, with threads of joy woven through the melody. She recognized it as Debussy, something impressionistic and dreamy that painted pictures of sunlight on water and children laughing in gardens. "Better?" he asked without stopping, glancing at her from the corner of his eye. "Much better," she confirmed. "You have incredible hands." The words slipped out before she could stop them, and she felt heat rise in her cheeks. But Damek just smiled, a real smile that transformed his usually serious face into something devastatingly handsome. "They're good for a few things," he said, transitioning into something she didn't recognize, a melody that seemed to be flowing directly from his imagination onto the keys. "This is something I've been working on. I don't think it has a name." Yet the music was hauntingly beautiful, full of longing and hope, and something that sounded suspiciously like love. As he played, Serena found herself watching his profile, the way his lashes cast shadows on his cheekbones, the small frown of concentration between his eyebrows, the way his lips curved slightly when he hit a particularly satisfying chord progression. "It's about you," he said quietly, still playing. "All of it. The hope, the beauty, the way you've brought light into this house, into my life." Serena's breath caught. "Damek, I know," he said, the music growing softer, more intimate. "I know we said we'd see what happens, that we wouldn't rush anything." But 8 months of watching you be an incredible mother, 8 months of your laughter in my gardens, 8 months of wanting to tell you how beautiful you are and not knowing if I have the right." The music stopped abruptly. "I'm falling in love with you, Serena. I've been falling in love with you since that night in the storm, and I don't know how to pretend otherwise anymore." The silence that followed was charged with electricity. Serena could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of his confession settling between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Of me? Of this? Of wanting something I might not get to keep? Of my children getting attached to you?" And then she couldn't finish the sentence. Damek turned on the bench to face her fully, his grey eyes serious and sincere. "Serena, I need you to understand something. This isn't a whim for me, or a rebellion against my marriage, or some kind of midlife crisis. You and Luna and Kai, you're not just living in my house, you're living in my heart. I wake up every morning grateful that you're here, and I go to sleep every night terrified that someday you might decide to leave. What about Camilla? What about her?" His voice was flat, emotionless. "We've been living separate lives for over a year. She has her charity boards and her social events and her other interests. I have my work and my music, and for the past 8 months, the most beautiful family I could never have imagined finding." Serena studied his face, looking for any sign of deception or uncertainty, but all she saw was honesty and love and a vulnerability that made her chest ache. "If I do this," she said slowly, "if I let myself love you back, and I'm not saying I haven't already started to, I need you to understand what you're signing up for. I'm a package deal. My children will always come first, always, and if you ever hurt them or abandon them the way their father did—" "I would never," Damek said fiercely. "Serena, I love those babies like they're my own. Luna with her serious little face and the way she studies everything like she's taking notes for later. Kai with his determination to crawl faster than any baby in the history of the world. They're not obstacles to loving you, they're part of why I love you. You're an incredible mother, and watching you with them makes me want to be the kind of man who deserves to be part of that." Tears pricked at Serena's eyes. "You already are that man," she whispered. "You've been that man since the night you carried me through the rain." "Then dance with me," he said, standing and extending his hand to her. "Dance with me like we should have done months ago." There was no music now, except the soft sound of their breathing and the distant whisper of wind in the trees outside. But as Serena placed her hand in his and let him pull her into his arms, she could hear something better than any melody. The sound of her own heart finally deciding to trust again. They moved together slowly, swaying in the lamplight, her head finding its natural place against his shoulder, his hand warm and sure on her lower back. Through the tall windows, stars wheeled overhead like witnesses to their beginning, and the garden stretched out around them like a promise of all the beautiful tomorrows they might build together. "I love you too," Serena whispered against his neck, feeling him go still in her arms. "I've been trying not to, but I love you too." Damek pulled back to look at her, his face radiant with joy and relief, and something that looked suspiciously like tears. "Say it again," he requested, his voice rough with emotion. "I love you, Damek Mace," she said clearly, standing on her toes to press her forehead against his. "I love your music and your kindness and the way you read bedtime stories to babies who aren't even yours. I love that you carried me through a storm and then gave me a home in your heart." He kissed her then, soft and sweet, and full of 8 months of restrained longing, finally given permission to breathe. She tasted like hope and felt like coming home, and when they finally broke apart, both of them were smiling through tears. "So what happens now?" Serena asked, her hands still fisted in his sweater. "Now," Damek said, brushing a curl away from her face, "we figure out how to build a life together, you and me and 2 babies who deserve all the love in the world." And, "Camilla? I'll handle Camilla," he said, his voice growing hard for just a moment before softening again as he looked at her. "She stopped being my problem the moment I realized you were my solution." Outside, somewhere in the mansion that had been too empty for too long, a clock chimed midnight. A new day was beginning, and with it, the first chapter of a love story that had been 8 months in the making. But neither Damek nor Serena knew that in her tower bedroom, overlooking the gardens, Camilla Mace stood at her window watching them dance, her beautiful face twisted with rage and the kind of cold calculation that had always been her trademark. The charity boards and social events were about to become the least of her concerns. The game, as far as Camilla was concerned, was just beginning. Chapter 5. The Language of Flowers. November arrived at the estate like a whispered secret, painting the gardens in shades of amber and copper while wrapping the morning air in that particular coolness that spoke of winter's approach. For Serena, it had become the most beautiful month of her life. 4 weeks since that midnight dance in the music room had changed everything between her and Damek. 4 weeks of discovering what it meant to be loved by a man who treated her heart like the precious thing it was. Their courtship unfolded with the deliberate grace of a classical symphony, each movement building on the last. Damek seemed to understand instinctively that Serena needed to be wooed slowly, carefully, with the kind of patient devotion that would heal the wounds Knox had left on her ability to trust. So he courted her with flowers. It started the morning, after their first kiss, when Serena found a single white rose on her doorstep with a note written in Damek's elegant handwriting, "For new beginnings and the courage to believe in them." The next day brought purple lavender, "For devotion that grows stronger with time," then yellow tulips, "For the sunshine of your smile and the way it brightens every room you enter." Each flower came with its own message, and Serena found herself researching florography, learning that Damek was composing love letters in petals and stems, pink peonies for honor and wealth of spirit, white jasmine for sweet love and amiability, red camellias for the flame that burned in his heart for her. She began responding in kind, leaving him coffee and handwritten notes with lines of Persian poetry her grandmother had taught her, verses that spoke of love as patient as mountains and fierce as desert storms. Sometimes she would translate the Farsi for him, watching his face transform as he understood the depth of emotion in words that had been passed down through generations of women who knew what it meant to love completely. "Golabi man, rose of my heart," she wrote one morning, "my grandmother used to say that love is not about finding someone to live with, but finding someone you cannot live without. I think I'm beginning to understand what she meant." The domesticity of their days took on a sweetness that neither of them had expected. Damek began spending his mornings in the cottage before heading to his office in downtown Boston, ostensibly to check on estate matters, but really to steal moments with Serena and the twins. He would arrive just as she was getting the babies fed and dressed, and somehow those chaotic 20 minutes of preparing for the day became the most peaceful part of his routine. Luna had taken to him immediately, her serious amber eyes following. His movements with the kind of focus that suggested she was cataloging everything about him for future reference. She would reach for him with chubby fists when he came near, and the first time she'd grabbed his finger and held on, Damek had gone absolutely still with wonder. "She knows you're important," Serena had said, watching the baby study Damek's face with intense concentration. Babies can sense these things. Kai was more reserved, watching Damek with the cautious assessment of someone who'd learned early that not all adults could be trusted. But gradually, the little boy began to warm to this man, who spoke to him like he was a person rather than an object, who got down on the floor to play rather than expecting to be entertained from a distance. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday morning when Kai was fussing over a particularly difficult teething episode. Nothing Serena tried would console him. Not feeding, not rocking, not the usual arsenal of maternal comfort. Damek, who had been quietly reading estate correspondence at the kitchen table, suddenly began to hum. It was the melody he'd been composing, the one he'd told Serena was about her and her children. The wordless tune was soothing and familiar, and within minutes Kai had stopped crying and was staring at Damek with something that looked suspiciously like recognition. "He remembers," Serena had whispered, tears pricking her eyes. "You must have hummed that while I was pregnant, that first night in the hospital. He remembers your voice." From that moment on, Kai was as devoted to Damek as his sister, and Serena often found all three of them on the cottage floor in the mornings, two babies crawling over a man in a $1,000 suit who didn't seem to care that they were drooling on his Italian silk ties. But it was the evenings that had become truly magical. After dinner, when the twins were settled for the night, Serena and Damek had fallen into the habit of walking through the gardens together. The estate was beautiful in daylight, but at night it became something transcendent. Pathways lit by subtle solar lights, fountains creating music in the darkness, the scent of late blooming roses carried on the cool air. They talked about everything during those walks. Damek shared stories of his lonely childhood, his complicated relationship with success, his dreams of creating something meaningful with his life beyond just accumulating wealth. Serena spoke of her grandmother's wisdom, her years as a nurse, her fears and hopes for Luna and Kai's futures. "Tell me about Knox," Damek said one evening as they sat on a bench beside the fountain, watching moonlight dance on the water. Serena was quiet for a long moment, considering how much to share. "He was charming," she said finally. "The kind of charming that feels dangerous and exciting when you're young and haven't learned to recognize the warning signs. He was a few years older, worked in finance, always had money for expensive dinners and weekend trips. I thought I was sophisticated for dating someone like him. What changed? I grew up," she said simply, "and I got pregnant. The moment I told him about the twins, it was like a switch flipped. Suddenly I wasn't his exciting girlfriend anymore. I was a problem to be solved. He offered to pay for an abortion, and when I refused, he got angry, said I was trying to trap him, that he wasn't ready to be tied down by complications." Damek's jaw tightened. "He called your children complications." "His children," Serena corrected. "Biologically anyway, but yes, that's exactly what he called them. Two perfect little souls, and he saw them as nothing but obstacles to his freedom." She turned to look at Damek in the moonlight. "That's when I knew I couldn't make it work with him, no matter how much I'd thought I loved him. Anyone who could look at new life as a burden instead of a blessing wasn't someone I wanted in my children's lives." "He's a fool," Damek said fiercely, "a complete and utter fool." "His loss," Serena agreed, echoing the words she'd spoken in the hospital the night the twins were born. "But I'm grateful in a way. If he'd stayed, if he'd been the kind of man who could love them properly, I never would have met you." Damek reached for her hand, threading their fingers together in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. "Do you really believe that? That we were meant to find each other?" "I believe in a lot of things I didn't believe in a year ago," Serena said, leaning against his shoulder. "I believe that sometimes terrible things happen to put you exactly where you need to be for something beautiful to begin. I believe that love isn't always planned or convenient or sensible, but that doesn't make it any less real. And I believe that some souls recognize each other the moment they meet, even if it takes the minds a little longer to catch up." "My soul knew you," Damek said quietly. "That night in the storm, when I saw you fighting to bring your babies into the world, something in me just recognized something in you. Like I'd been waiting my whole life for that moment without knowing it. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the fountain and the distant sound of night birds settling in the trees. The main house glowed softly in the distance, most of its windows dark, except for the light in Camilla's suite. Serena tried not to think about Damek's wife, about the confrontation that was surely coming, about how precarious her happiness really was. "What are you thinking about?" Damek asked, following her gaze toward the house. "Reality," Serena admitted. "This feels like a dream sometimes, too beautiful to be real. Part of me keeps waiting for something to go wrong." "What if nothing goes wrong?" he asked. "What if this is just the beginning of everything going right?" Before she could answer, Serena's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at the screen and felt her blood turn to ice. The message was from an unknown number, but she recognized the arrogant tone immediately. "Heard you're playing house with a rich man. Hope you're enjoying it while it lasts. We need to talk." Damek noticed her sudden tension immediately. "What is it?" Serena showed him the message, watching his expression darken as he read. "Knox," she said unnecessarily. "How did he get your number?" "I don't know. I changed it after I moved here," but she felt sick, the beautiful peace of the evening shattered by the reminder that their happiness existed in a bubble that others could puncture at will. Damek stood abruptly, pacing to the edge of the fountain and back. "This ends now," he said, his voice carrying the authority of a man accustomed to solving problems decisively. "I'm having my security team trace this number, and I'm getting you a new phone tomorrow with a number that only you, I, and Mrs. Whitmore know." "Damek, you can't protect me from everything. Watch me," he said, turning to face her with eyes that blazed silver in the moonlight. "Serena, you and those babies are the most important things in my world. I will absolutely protect you from everything I possibly can, and I will eliminate anything that threatens your peace or safety." The fierce protectiveness in his voice should have scared her, but instead it made her feel cherished in a way she'd never experienced. Knox had made her feel like a burden, like someone whose problems were her own to solve. Damek made her feel like someone worth defending. "I love you," she said, the words coming out more intense than she'd intended. The change in his expression was immediate and devastating. The anger melted away, replaced by something so tender it made her chest ache. He crossed back to her in 2 strides and cupped her face in his hands. "I love you too," he said, pressing his forehead against hers. "More than I knew it was possible to love anyone. And I promise you, Serena, Knox or anyone else who wants to hurt you will have to go through me first." He kissed her then, soft and fierce and full of promises, while somewhere in the darkness, a text message from another number lit up her old phone. "Soon, darling. Very soon. See." But neither of them saw that message, and for one more perfect night, they were able to believe that love might actually be enough to keep the storms at bay. Chapter 6. When Storms Collide. The Children's Hospital Charity Gala was supposed to be Camilla Mace's crowning social achievement of the season. Held in the ballroom of Boston's most prestigious hotel, it drew the city's elite like moths to flame. Old money and new money mingling over champagne and 7-course dinners, while pretending their charitable contributions weren't primarily motivated by tax write-offs and social positioning. Serena hadn't wanted to attend. The invitation had arrived addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Damek Mason Guest, and even though Damek had made it clear that she would be his date, the whole situation felt like walking into a lion's den wearing a suit made of meat. "You don't have to do this," Damek had said that morning as she stood in front of her bedroom mirror, smoothing the deep sapphire silk of the dress he'd had delivered from Saks. It was beautiful, elegant and sophisticated without being flashy, but she felt like she was putting on armor for battle. "Yes, I do," she'd replied, meeting his eyes in the mirror. I can't hide in the cottage forever, and if I'm going to be part of your life, I need to be part of all of it. Besides, she'd added with a smile that was braver than she felt, someone needs to make sure you don't spend the entire evening talking business in a corner. Luna and Kai were staying with Mrs. Whitmore for the evening, an arrangement that had taken weeks to negotiate. Mrs. Whitmore had finally convinced Serena that the babies would be perfectly safe and that new mothers needed occasional evenings to remember they were also women. Now, standing in the hotel ballroom, surrounded by Boston's social aristocracy, Serena was beginning to think she should have listened to her instincts and stayed home. The evening had started well enough. Damek had been the perfect gentleman, introducing her to his business associates and longtime friends with genuine pride and affection. "This is Serena Edwin," he would say, his hand warm and reassuring on her lower back. "She manages my estate and makes my life infinitely more beautiful." Most people had been polite, even warm. Serena's natural grace and intelligence quickly won over the few who might have been inclined to judge, and her background as a nurse gave her common ground with the doctors and hospital administrators in attendance. But she'd felt Camilla's eyes on her all evening like a physical weight. Damek's wife was stunning in the way that money and breeding and careful genetic selection could create. Tall, blonde, and elegant in a cream-colored gown that probably cost more than most people's cars. She moved through the ballroom like a queen holding court, air-kissing her way through conversations with the practiced ease of someone who'd been groomed for this role since birth. She'd barely acknowledged Serena's presence, offering only a cool nod when Damek had made introductions early in the evening. But Serena could feel the calculation behind those ice-blue eyes, the assessment of a predator deciding how best to eliminate a threat. The attack came during the auction portion of the evening. Serena had excused herself to the ladies' room, needing a moment away from the overwhelming sensory experience of too many people, too much perfume, and too many conversations happening at once. She was touching up her lipstick when Camilla swept in, her cream gown rustling like whispered threats. "Well, well," Camilla said, positioning herself at the mirror beside Serena's. "If it isn't the estate manager." "Mrs. Mace," Serena replied, evenly, refusing to be intimidated. "Please, call me Camilla. We're practically family now, aren't we?" The words dripped with false sweetness. "I have to say, you've certainly made yourself comfortable in my husband's life and in his house." "I live in the cottage," Serena said carefully. "I work for your husband." Camilla laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. "Oh, darling, let's not pretend this is about work. You're a beautiful woman with 2 bastard children and no money, and my husband has always had a savior complex. It's really quite predictable when you think about it." Heat flashed through Serena's chest, but she kept her voice level. "My children are not bastards, and what's between your husband and me is none of your concern." "Everything about my husband is my concern," Camilla said, her mask finally slipping to reveal the cold calculation underneath. "I am his wife. You are an employee who's forgotten her place." "Your marriage has been over for years," Serena said quietly. "Everyone knows it." "My marriage is a legal contract," Camilla replied, snapping her compact shut with unnecessary force. "One that entitles me to half of everything Damek has built. Do you really think he's going to throw away billions of dollars for a nurse with a charity case sob story?" Before Serena could respond, Camilla swept toward the door, then paused with her hand on the handle. "Enjoy tonight, dear. It may be the last time you're welcome in polite society." Serena remained in the bathroom for several more minutes, trying to calm her racing heart and restore her composure. She'd known this confrontation was coming, had been preparing for it mentally for weeks, but the reality of Camilla's venom was more unsettling than she'd expected. When she finally returned to the ballroom, the auction was in full swing. Damek was bidding on a week at a luxury resort in Tuscany, presumably for them to take together once everything with Camilla was settled. The thought should have thrilled her, but Camilla's words echoed in her mind. Do you really think he's going to throw away billions of dollars? She was so lost in thought that she didn't notice the commotion at first. It started as murmurs, then escalated to the kind of excited whispers that rippled through high society events when scandal was in the air. People were turning toward the ballroom entrance, phones appearing despite the event's supposedly strict no media policy. That's when she saw him. Knox stood in the doorway of the ballroom like he owned the place, tall and handsome in a tuxedo that fit him flawlessly. Beside him was a woman Serena didn't recognize, blonde, striking, and wearing enough diamonds to finance a small country. The woman's hand was possessively placed on Knox's arm, and she was surveying the room with the confidence of someone accustomed to being the most important person wherever she went. Serena realized, with a sick feeling, that this must be Lydia Crane, the attorney girlfriend who'd somehow secured them invitations to Boston's most exclusive charity event. Serena felt the blood drain from her face as Knox's eyes found hers across the crowded room. His smile was the same charming, predatory grin that had once made her pulse race and now made her stomach turn with dread. Serena. Damek appeared at her side, following her horrified gaze. What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. Knox, she whispered. He's here. Damek's expression went from concern to fury in less than a second. How the hell did he get in here? Before Serena could answer, Knox was making his way through the crowd toward them, the blonde woman trailing behind him like an accessory. Conversations died in their wake as people recognized the drama unfolding before them. Serena, Knox said when he reached them, his voice carrying just enough warmth to sound genuine to any eavesdroppers. You look beautiful. Motherhood agrees. With you, Knox. Her voice was steady, but Damek could feel her trembling beside him. I don't believe we've been introduced, Knox continued, extending his hand to Damek with practiced confidence. Knox Morrison. I'm Luna and Kai's father. The words hit the ballroom like a bomb. Conversation stopped entirely now, and Serena could feel hundreds of eyes on them, smartphones discreetly recording what was clearly going to be the social event of the season. Damek ignored Knox's outstretched hand. You signed away your parental rights, he said quietly, his voice carrying deadly calm. You have no claim to those children. Knox's smile widened. Actually, that's not entirely accurate. You see, I never signed anything. I may have abandoned my responsibilities temporarily, but I never legally relinquished my parental rights. My fiancée here, he gestured to the blonde woman, is an excellent attorney, and she's helped me understand that I still have full legal standing as their biological father. Irregularities. Serena found her voice, though it came out higher than she intended. Not irregularities, Lydia Crane corrected smoothly. Legal opportunities. Knox may have been absent, but he never formally terminated his parental rights. That means he has every legal right to seek custody, visitation, and child support arrangements. Her voice was crisp, professional, and absolutely terrifying. What do you want? Damek asked, stepping slightly in front of Serena in a gesture that was protective and possessive at the same time. I want to see my children, Knox said, his voice loud enough to carry to the interested observers surrounding them. I want to be part of their lives. Is that so unreasonable? You abandoned them, Serena said, her voice growing stronger with anger. You called them complications and walked away. I was young and scared, Knox replied, and if she hadn't known him so, well, Serena might have believed the regret in his voice. I've made mistakes, but I've grown up and I want to make things right. How touching, came Camilla's voice from behind them. She'd materialized during the confrontation like a shark scenting blood in the water. a father wanting to reconnect with his children. How could anyone oppose such a noble desire? The pieces clicked into place in Serena's mind with horrifying clarity. Knox and Camilla were working together. Somehow, they'd found each other and decided that their mutual enemy was the happiness she'd found with Damek. "This is neither the time nor the place for this conversation," Damek said, his voice carrying the authority of a man accustomed to ending discussions when he chose to. "If you have legal concerns, you can take them up with my attorneys." "Oh, but this is the perfect place," Camilla said sweetly. "After all, everyone should know what kind of woman you've been spending your time with. A woman who keeps a man's children from their father, who moves in with a married man who—" "That's enough," Damek said, his voice cutting through Camilla's words like a blade. "Serena, we're leaving." But as they turned to go, Knox's voice followed them, pitched perfectly to carry throughout the now silent ballroom. "I'll see you in court, Serena. I'll see my children soon." The ride home was silent, except for the sound of Serena's quiet tears. Damek drove with controlled fury, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, while Serena stared out the window at the city lights blurring past. "I'm so sorry," she finally whispered as they pulled through the estate gates. "I've ruined everything." Damek parked the car and turned to face her, his expression fierce with love and determination. "You haven't ruined anything," he said. "They ambushed us, but that doesn't mean they've won. Serena, look at me." She turned to meet his eyes, and what she saw there took her breath away. Not anger at her, not regret for the public scene, but absolute, unwavering devotion. "I meant what I said in the garden that night," he told her. "Anyone who wants to hurt you will have to go through me first. Knox, Camilla, whoever else wants to play games. They have no idea what they're up against." "What if he really can take the children?" Serena asked, voicing her deepest fear. "What if Victoria Ashford is as good as she thinks she is?" "Then we'll fight him with everything we have," Damek said simply. "We'll hire the best attorneys money can buy, we'll gather evidence of his abandonment and his character, and we'll prove that those babies belong exactly where they are, with their mother, in a home where they're loved and wanted and safe. And if we lose—" Damek cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "We won't lose," he said, with quiet confidence, "because we have something they don't have." "What's that?" "The truth," he said, pressing his forehead against hers. "And love, and each other. That's more than enough to win any war they want to start." He kissed her then, soft and fierce and full of promises, and for a moment, Serena let herself believe that love really could conquer all. But as they walked toward the cottage together, she couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was just beginning. Inside the cottage, Mrs. Whitmore was waiting with a report that both babies had been perfect, angels all evening. Luna and Kai were sleeping peacefully in their cribs, completely unaware that their world had just been threatened by forces beyond their understanding. "How was the gala?" Mrs. Whitmore asked, then took one look at their faces and didn't wait for an answer. "I'll put the kettle on," she said simply, and Serena felt a rush of gratitude for this woman who seemed to know exactly what was needed in any situation. Over tea in the cottage kitchen, they told Mrs. Whitmore everything. She listened without interruption, her expression growing more serious with each detail. "Knox Morrison," she said when they finished. "I'll have our security team run a background check immediately. And Victoria Ashford, I know that name. She's ambitious, expensive, and she doesn't take cases she doesn't think she can win." "That's not exactly reassuring," Serena said. "Actually, it is," Mrs. Whitmore replied, "because it means they think they have something solid, which means we know what we're dealing with. Better to face a known enemy than an unknown one." Damek's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it, and his expression darkened further. "What, now?" Serena asked. "Julian Blackwood," Damek said, showing her the message. "Camilla's Friend. He wants to meet for drinks tomorrow to discuss the situation. Apparently, he thinks we can work out some kind of arrangement. What kind of arrangement? The kind where I give them what they want, and everyone walks away, quietly, Damek said grimly. The kind where you and the babies disappear from my life. Camilla gets to keep playing the grieving wife, and Knox gets to look like the reformed father fighting for his children. And what are you going to tell him? Damek's smile was sharp as a blade. I'm going to tell him that if he wants a war, he's picked the wrong opponent. And then I'm going to destroy him so thoroughly that he'll wish he'd never heard the name, Mace. Mrs. Whitmore cleared her throat delicately. Perhaps, she said, we should consider a more strategic approach. Mr. Mace, you're a businessman. You know that the best way to win a war is to never let your enemies see you coming. What do you suggest? We play their game, she said simply. We let them think they're winning while we gather everything we need to destroy them properly. Knox Morrison signed away his parental rights. Forged documents or not, there will be records, witnesses, evidence of his character. Camilla has been living a very expensive lifestyle on your money while conducting an affair. That kind of behavior leaves trails. Victoria Ashford may be good, but she's not infallible. And ambitious attorneys sometimes cut corners when they think they're dealing with easy targets. Serena felt a flicker of hope for the first time since seeing Knox in the ballroom. You think we can beat them? I think, Mrs. Whitmore said with a smile that reminded Serena why this woman had been running Damek's life so efficiently for years. They have no idea what they've just started. Mr. Mace didn't build a billion-dollar empire by backing down from fights, and I didn't spend 30 years in corporate politics without learning how to destroy people who threaten what I protect. As if summoned by their conversation, Serena's phone rang. Unknown number. She looked at Damek, who nodded grimly. Answer it, he said. Let's see what they want. Serena accepted the call and put it on speaker. Knox's voice filled the kitchen, smooth and confident. Serena, darling, I hope you're not too upset about tonight. I really didn't want things to get dramatic, but sometimes the truth has a way of coming out in public. What do you want, Knox? She asked, proud that her voice remained steady. I want to see my children, he said. I want to be part of their lives. Surely you can understand that. What I understand, Serena replied, is that you abandoned us when I was pregnant and signed away your rights for money. What I understand is that you're only back because you think there's something in it for you. Knox laughed, and the sound made her skin crawl. Oh, Serena, always so suspicious. Maybe I'm back because I've realized what a mistake I made. Maybe I've grown up and want to do the right thing. And maybe you're working with Camilla Mace to destroy my relationship with Damek, Serena said, deciding to see how he'd react to the direct accusation. There was a pause, and when Knox spoke again, his voice had lost some of its practiced charm. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm simply a father who wants to know his children. Then you can go through the proper legal channels, Damek said, speaking for the first time. You can file whatever motions you think you have grounds for, and we'll see you in court. Actually, Knox said, his voice regaining its confidence, I was hoping we could work something out privately. I'm not unreasonable, Damek. I understand that you've become attached to Luna and Kai. I'm not trying to take them away completely. How generous of you, Damek said dryly. I'm prepared to be very reasonable about custody arrangements, Knox continued. Weekends, holidays, that sort of thing. And of course, I'd expect Serena to be reasonable about child support. Retroactive child support, given that I've missed the first 8 months of their lives. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't about fatherhood at all. It was about money. Knox wanted to establish paternity so he could demand financial support, probably with the goal of bleeding Damek's resources while Camilla positioned herself for a favorable divorce settlement. And if we refuse? Serena asked. Then we go to court, Knox said simply. "And I fight for full custody. I have an excellent attorney, and I think a judge might be very interested to hear about the living arrangements you've created for my children. An unmarried woman living with a married man, accepting expensive gifts, allowing her children to be cared for by household staff while she plays dress-up at charity galas." "You're threatening us," Damek said, his voice deadly quiet. "I'm offering you a choice," Knox corrected. "Cooperation or litigation, your decision." The line went dead, leaving them staring at the phone in stunned silence. "Well," Mrs. Whitmore said finally, "at least now we know exactly what we're dealing with." "Extortion," Damek said flatly. "They want money and they're using the children as leverage." "Can they win?" Serena asked, voicing the question that terrified her most. Mrs. Whitmore was quiet for a long moment, considering. "With a good attorney and the right judge? Possibly. The optics aren't ideal. You are living with a married man, accepting support. That could be characterized as payment for services, and Knox does have biological rights that could be difficult to challenge." Serena felt her world tilting on its axis. "So we give them what they want? Absolutely not," Damek said fiercely. "We fight, we gather evidence, we expose their real motives, and we protect our family." "Our family," Serena repeated, her heart. And catching on the words, "Our family," Damek confirmed, reaching for her hand. "You, me, Luna, and Kai. That's what this is, Serena. That's what we're fighting for." As if in response to their father's declaration, Kai's cry echoed from upstairs, not distressed, just awake and wanting attention. Serena smiled despite everything, the sound of her son's voice, reminding her what really mattered. "I should go to him," she said, standing. "We should go to him," Damek corrected, and together they climbed the stairs to tend to their children, leaving Mrs. Whitmore to begin planning a war that would determine the fate of their unconventional but perfect family. Outside in the gardens, autumn wind rustled through the trees like whispered warnings, and in the main house, Camilla Mace stood at her window, watching the cottage lights, already planning her next move in a game she was absolutely determined to win. Chapter 7. Love, Letters and Legal Wars. December arrived with the kind of bitter cold that turned Boston into a crystalline wonderland, each morning revealing gardens transformed by frost into something that belonged in fairy tales. But inside the cottage, warmth radiated from more than just the crackling fireplace. It came from the love letters that had become Damek and Serena's lifeline during the 3 weeks since the charity gala had exploded their private world into public scandal. The legal battle had begun in earnest the Monday after Knox's threatening phone call. His attorney girlfriend had filed motions for paternity testing, custody evaluation, and emergency visitation rights, each document crafted with the precision of someone who knew exactly how to weaponize the legal system. Damek's attorneys, the best that money could buy, were fighting back with equal vigor, but the process was slow, expensive, and emotionally devastating. Meanwhile, the media had caught scent of the story. "Billionaire's secret family," screamed the tabloid headlines. "Love child scandal rocks Boston society." The photographers had started appearing at the estate gates, long lenses trained on the cottage windows, hoping to catch glimpses of the woman and children at the center of the drama. It was in this atmosphere of siege and scrutiny that Damek and Serena had rediscovered the power of written words. The first letter had appeared on Serena's pillow 3 days after the gala, written in Damek's distinctive handwriting on paper that smelled faintly of his cologne. "My dearest Serena, I know these past few days have been overwhelming, and I know you're questioning whether our love is worth the price everyone seems determined to make us pay. I'm writing this because I need you to understand something with absolute clarity. You are not a burden to be borne or a problem to be solved. You are the answer to questions I didn't even know I was asking. Before you, I was a man who measured success in quarterly reports and stock prices. I had everything money could buy and nothing that mattered. Then you stumbled into my life in the middle of a storm, bringing with you 2 perfect children and a strength that humbles me daily, and suddenly I understood what I'd been building my empire for. Not for me, but for us. For the family I never dared to dream I could have. Let them say what they will about us. Let them question our motives and judge our choices. They don't understand that some loves are worth fighting for, worth risking everything to protect. You are worth it, Serena. Luna and Kai are worth it. What we're building together is worth it. Forever yours, Damek. Serena had cried over that letter, then sat down immediately to write her response. My beloved Damek. My grandmother used to tell me that love letters were prayers written in ink, conversations between souls that transcended the limitations of spoken words. I never understood what she meant until now, until I found myself pouring my heart onto paper because talking feels too small for everything I need to tell you. You say I brought strength into your life, but you have it backwards. You saved me, not just that night in the storm, but every day since. You saved me from a life of struggling to survive instead of living. You saved my children from uncertainty and fear. You saved all of us from a world that would have been colder, harder, lonelier without your love. Knox can question my motives. Camilla can spread her poison. The media can write their stories, but they will never understand the truth. I didn't fall in love with your money or your mansion or your social position. I fell in love with the man who hummed lullabies to babies who weren't his, who learned the language of flowers to court me properly, who plays piano in the middle of the night because his heart is too full to sleep. With all my love, Serena. And so it continued, letter after letter, even though they saw each other every day. Somehow, the written words allowed them to express depths of feeling that face-to-face conversations couldn't contain. Damek wrote about his childhood loneliness, his fear that he wasn't good enough to be a father to Luna and Kai, his determination to create the kind of family he'd always dreamed of. Serena shared her grandmother's stories, her fears about the legal battles, her growing certainty that their love was strong enough to survive whatever tests the world threw at them. The letters became their sanctuary during the daily chaos of depositions, court filings, and strategy sessions with attorneys. While lawyers argued technicalities and private investigators dug up dirt on Knox's character, Damek and Serena were falling deeper in love through words that painted pictures of their hopes and dreams. Mrs. Whitmore had become their unofficial general in the war against Knox and Camilla. Her research had uncovered a treasure trove of damaging information. Knox's history of financial irresponsibility, his pattern of abandoning relationships when they became inconvenient, his attorney, girlfriend's previous disbarment proceedings in another state for ethics violations. Camilla's affairs were well documented, as was her expensive lifestyle, funded entirely by Damek's money while contributing nothing to their marriage. We're building a case, Mrs. Whitmore had explained during one of their evening strategy sessions. But we need to be patient. Knox and his girlfriend are expecting us to react emotionally, to make mistakes they can exploit. Instead, we're going to be methodical, thorough, and absolutely devastating when the time comes. The twins, now 9 months old, seemed blissfully unaware of the adult drama swirling around them. Luna had become mobile, crawling everywhere with determined curiosity, while Kai was pulling himself up on furniture and taking tentative first steps. They brought lightness to even the darkest moments, their giggles and babbling creating pockets of pure joy that reminded everyone what they were really fighting for. One evening, as snow fell softly outside the cottage windows, Damek found a letter from Serena that made him stop breathing. My darling Damek. Tonight, I watched you teaching Kai to clap his hands while Luna tried to help by grabbing your tie. And I realized something that terrifies and thrills me in equal measure. I want to marry you, not because of the legal protection it would offer, not because it would make the custody battle easier, but because I want to stand before God and our family and promise to love you for the rest of my life. I want to wear your ring and take your name and build a future where Luna and Kai grow up knowing they were wanted and cherished from their very first breath. I want more children with you someday, if we're blessed with that gift. I want to grow old in your gardens, surrounded by grandchildren who will never doubt they belong to a family built on love rather than obligation. I know the timing is terrible with everything that's happening. I know people will say we're rushing, that we're making decisions based on legal strategy rather than love, but my heart doesn't care about timing or public opinion. My heart knows what it wants, and it wants you. Forever and always. Tell me, I'm not crazy for dreaming of white dresses and wedding rings while lawyers are trying to take my children away. Tell me you dream of it too. Yours completely, Serena. Damek read the letter 3 times, then walked to the piano where he composed a melody that sounded like wedding bells and promises and all the hope in his heart. When he finished playing, he sat down to write the most important letter of his life. My beloved future wife, you're not crazy. I've been carrying my grandmother's engagement ring in my pocket for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment to ask you the question that's been burning in my chest since the night we first danced. I want to marry you, Serena Edwin. I want to adopt Luna and Kai legally and give them the security of knowing they belong to us forever. I want to build the kind of love story that our children will tell their children. The ring was my grandmother's. A simple, solitaire diamond surrounded by smaller stones that catch the light like stars. She would have loved you, would have understood that some women are worth waiting a lifetime to find. Tomorrow night, after the babies are asleep, meet me in the music room. I have a question to ask you properly. Until forever begins, Damek. The next evening, Serena stood in the doorway of the music room, wearing the sapphire dress from the gala, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. Damek was at the piano, playing the melody he'd composed after reading her letter. Their melody, the one that told the story of how 2 broken souls had found their missing pieces in each other. When the music stopped, he turned to find her, watching him with tears of joy streaming down her face. Without words, he dropped to one knee beside the piano bench, producing a ring that caught the lamplight like captured starlight. Serena Edwin, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Will you marry me? Will you let me love you and Luna and Kai for the rest of my life? Will you build a family with me that's strong enough to weather any storm? Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, 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 as he slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms for a kiss that tasted like promises and forever. Outside, snow continued to fall on the gardens where they'd first learned to love each other, while inside the cottage, 2 babies slept peacefully, unaware that their world had just become infinitely more secure. The legal battles would continue. The media would have their field day, but none of that mattered now. They were engaged, they were in love, and they were ready to face whatever came next together. Chapter 8. The Art of Beautiful Revenge. January brought a cold snap that froze Boston Harbor and turned the estate's fountains into sculptures of ice. But inside the cottage, Serena's engagement ring caught firelight and threw rainbows across the walls as she fed Luna her morning bottle. 3 weeks had passed since Damek's proposal. 3 weeks of planning a quiet spring wedding while their lawyers prepared for the custody hearing that would determine their family's future. Knox's legal assault had intensified since news of their engagement leaked to the press. His attorney girlfriend had filed motion after motion, each one designed to paint Serena as an unfit mother who'd abandoned her children's welfare in pursuit of wealth. The tabloids were having a field day with headlines like "Gold Diggers Desperate," "Gambit," and "Billionaire's Baby Mama Strikes Back." But Mrs. Whitmore's investigation had finally borne fruit, and today they would begin their counterattack. "Are you ready for this?" Demek asked, adjusting his tie in the cottage's hallway mirror. They were heading to his lawyer's office for a final strategy session before the custody hearing scheduled for the following week. "As ready as I'll ever be," Serena replied, settling Kai into his car seat while Mrs. Whitmore gathered Luna's diaper bag. The twins would spend the day with their devoted caretaker while their parents prepared for legal war. The law offices of Morrison, Dale and Associates occupied the top 3 floors of a glass tower in downtown Boston, all marble floors and mahogany paneling designed to intimidate opposing counsel. But today, Serena felt confident as she walked into the conference room where their legal team had assembled evidence that would destroy Knox's case and reputation simultaneously. James Morrison, Damek's lead attorney, was a silver-haired man in his 60s who'd built his career on defending wealthy clients from exactly the kind of opportunistic attacks Knox was mounting. Spread across the conference table were stacks of documents, photographs and digital files that told the story of Knox's true character. "Ladies and gentlemen," Morrison began, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to commanding courtrooms, "we have enough evidence to not only defeat Knox Morrison's custody claim, but to ensure he never bothers this family again." The evidence was devastating. Knox's financial records showed a pattern of irresponsibility spanning years: defaulted loans, unpaid child support from a previous relationship, credit cards maxed out on gambling, and luxury purchases he couldn't afford. His employment history revealed a man who'd been fired from 3 jobs for ethics violations, including one incident where he'd embezzled client funds to cover his debts. But it was the personal evidence that would destroy him completely. Private investigators had uncovered Knox's history of domestic violence, including a restraining order filed by an ex-girlfriend in Chicago and police reports documenting his explosive temper. Most damning of all, they had security footage from the clinic where Serena had worked, showing Knox threatening her when she'd told him about the pregnancy. He said, and I quote, Morrison read from the transcript, "Get rid of them, or I'll make sure you regret it for the rest of your life." This was recorded on the clinic's security system and clearly shows his attitude toward the children he's now claiming to love. Serena felt a chill remembering that night. She'd been 6 months pregnant, exhausted from a double shift, and Knox had cornered her in the parking lot with demands that she terminate the pregnancy or give the babies up for adoption. His rage, when she'd refused, had been terrifying, and she'd known in that moment that whatever she'd thought she felt for him was completely dead. "What about his lawyer girlfriend?" Damek asked. Morrison smiled grimly. "Lydia Crane is facing disbarment proceedings in Illinois for client fund violations. She fled to Massachusetts hoping to rebuild her practice, but she's been operating here without proper licensing. Every motion she's filed on Knox's behalf is legally invalid, and she could face criminal charges for practicing law without a license." "So we have them," Serena said, hardly daring to believe it. "Completely," Morrison confirmed, "but we're not just going to defeat them. We're going to ensure they can never threaten your family again. Knox will face criminal charges for the forged documents he used to challenge the adoption papers. Lydia will be arrested for unlawful practice of law, and both of them will be liable for the legal fees you've incurred defending against their fraudulent case." Meanwhile, their investigation into Camilla had revealed equally damaging information. Her affair with Julian Blackwood was well documented, including photographs of them together at hotels registered under false names and financial records showing Julian had been paying for her shopping sprees and spa treatments. More importantly, they discovered that Camilla had been systematically stealing from the charitable foundations she managed, skimming donations for her personal use. Camilla has embezzled over $2 million from various charities over the past 3 years, Morrison explained. The evidence is ironclad. Bank transfers, forged signatures, falsified donation records. When this comes to light, she'll face federal charges for charity fraud. How do we expose them without looking vindictive? Serena asked. She wanted justice, but she didn't want to seem like she was attacking out of spite. We don't expose them, Morrison said with a smile. We let them expose themselves. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Rather than releasing the damaging information themselves, they would provide it anonymously to the FBI's white-collar crime division, the Massachusetts Bar Association, and several investigative journalists known for their charity fraud exposés. Knox and Camilla would face consequences that appeared to be the natural result of their own actions rather than targeted revenge. Over the following weeks, the plan went into motion with devastating efficiency. FBI agents arrived at Camilla's office with search warrants related to charity fraud. The Massachusetts Bar Association launched an investigation into unlicensed legal practice. Local news stations ran exposés on charity embezzlement that featured Camilla's photograph. Prominently, Knox was arrested at his hotel on charges related to attempted extortion and harassment. When reporters caught him in handcuffs being led from the building, his attorney girlfriend was nowhere to be found. She'd fled Boston the moment the Bar Association investigation was announced. But the most satisfying moment came when the custody hearing was called to order, and Knox failed to appear because he was sitting in a jail cell awaiting bail on felony charges. The judge dismissed all motions related to the case and issued a restraining order preventing Knox from contacting Serena or the twins. Case dismissed with prejudice, the judge announced, his gavel echoing through the courtroom like a death knell for Knox's ambitions. Given Mr. Morrison's complete abandonment of these children and his current legal troubles, this court sees no grounds for granting any form of custody or visitation rights. That evening, as snow fell softly on the estate grounds, Serena and Damek sat in the cottage living room, watching Luna and Kai play on a blanket before the fireplace. The twins were babbling to each other in their secret language, completely unaware that their futures had just been secured forever. It's over, Serena said, still hardly believing it. Really over. Not over, Damek corrected, pulling her closer. On the sofa. Just beginning. Knox and Camilla were obstacles to our happiness, but they were never the main story. The main story is us. You and me, and these perfect babies building a life together. What happens to Camilla now? Federal. Prison, most likely. Julian Blackwood has already filed for divorce and is claiming he had no knowledge of her criminal activities. She'll face this alone, just like she wanted everyone else to face their problems. Serena felt a moment of pity for the woman who'd tried so hard to destroy their happiness, but it passed quickly. Camilla had made her choices, and now she would live with the consequences. The wedding, Serena said suddenly. We can actually plan our wedding without looking over our shoulders. Damek's smile was radiant. June in the rose garden, just like we talked about. Luna in a flower girl dress, Kai as ring bearer, and you, in white, walking toward me through flowers that smell like heaven. And after the wedding, I formally adopt Luna and Kai, giving them my name and all the legal protection that comes with it. We honeymoon in Tuscany, while Mrs. Whitmore spoils the children rotten. We come home and start working on giving them siblings. Luna chose that moment to pull herself up on the coffee table and take 3 wobbly steps toward her mother, her face bright with pride at her accomplishment. Kai immediately began crawling after her, determined not to be left behind. "Look at them," Serena whispered, watching her children with tears of joy in her eyes. "They're perfect. They're safe. They're ours. Forever ours," Damek agreed, standing to scoop up both babies before they could tumble into anything dangerous. "And soon they'll have my name and my legal protection and all the brothers and sisters we can give them." As if they understood the conversation, both twins began giggling, their laughter filling the cottage with the sound of pure joy. Outside, the world continued to turn. Newspapers would print their stories of scandal and redemption, and somewhere Knox sat in a jail cell contemplating the spectacular failure of his schemes. But inside the cottage, a family celebrated victory, not through destruction of their enemies, but through the simple, profound happiness of love that had survived every test and emerged stronger than ever. Their revenge was complete, not because they had destroyed anyone, but because they had built something beautiful that no one could ever take away. Chapter 9. Diamonds in the Rain. April rain drummed against the cottage windows with the same rhythm that had brought Damek and Serena together exactly 1 year ago. But this time, the storm carried only promises instead of uncertainty. Tomorrow would mark the anniversary of that fateful night when a broken billionaire had found a woman in labor outside a clinic and changed both their lives forever. Serena stood at her bedroom window, watching the downpour transform the estate. Gardens into an impressionist painting of silver and green, her grandmother's engagement ring catching lamplight on her finger. In 12 hours, she would marry the man who'd saved her from the storm and given her children a father who loved them as if they'd been born from his own heart. Luna and Kai, now 13 months old and walking with the determined confidence of toddlers who owned the world, were napping peacefully in their rooms. Luna had developed into a thoughtful child who studied everything with serious amber eyes, while Kai had emerged as a fearless explorer who treated every day as a new adventure. Both children had been calling Damek Dada for months, and tomorrow that title would become legally true through adoption papers that would be signed alongside their wedding certificate. The custody battle had ended 4 months ago with Knox's arrest and Camilla's federal indictment for charity fraud. The media circus had eventually moved on to fresher scandals, leaving Damek and Serena free to plan their wedding in peace. They'd chosen a simple ceremony in the rose garden where they'd first danced, with only their closest friends and Mrs. Whitmore as witnesses. A soft knock interrupted her reverie. "Come in," she called, expecting Mrs. Whitmore with last-minute wedding details. Instead, Damek appeared in the doorway carrying a single white rose and wearing an expression of nervous excitement that made her heart flutter. "Hello, beautiful," he said, his voice carrying the same wonder it had held that first night when he'd found her in the rain. "You're not supposed to see me today," Serena protested, though she made no move to hide from him. "Bad luck. After everything we've survived, I don't think anything could bring us bad luck," Damek replied, crossing to where she stood by the window. "Besides, I have something for you, and it couldn't wait until tomorrow." "Another gift?" "Damek, you've already given me everything." "Not everything," he said, producing an envelope from his jacket pocket. "One more thing, the most important thing." Serena opened the envelope to find airline tickets. Not the first-class accommodations she'd expected for their honeymoon, but something that made her gasp with surprise. "Tehran," she whispered, reading the destination. "Your grandmother's homeland," Damek explained. "I know she died before you could take the trip you'd always planned together. I hoped maybe we could go together, so you could see the places she told you about, visit the gardens she described in her poetry." Tears blurred Serena's vision as she stared at the tickets. Her grandmother had spoken endlessly of the rose gardens, of Isfahan, the ancient bridges of her childhood, the mountains that surrounded the city where she'd been born. Serena had always dreamed of seeing those places, but never had the money or opportunity to travel so far. "Damek," she whispered, "this is..." "I've arranged for a translator and a guide who specializes in genealogy research. We'll spend 2 weeks tracing your grandmother's family history, visiting the places that shaped her stories, bringing some of her poetry back to where it was born." He paused, his grey eyes tender. Luna and Kai should know their heritage, should understand that they come from a line of strong, beautiful women who survived everything the world threw at them. "How did you..." she began, then stopped as the magnitude of his gesture hit her. This wasn't just a honeymoon, it was a pilgrimage, a chance to connect with roots she'd thought were lost forever. "Mrs. Whitmore helped with the research," Damek admitted. "She found records of your grandmother's family, located cousins who still live in Tehran. They're excited to meet you, to hear the stories your grandmother told about her life in America." Serena set the tickets carefully on her dresser and turned to face the man who continued to surprise her with the depth of his love. "You amazing, wonderful, perfect man," she said, framing his face with her hands. "How did I get so lucky?" "I'm the lucky one," Damek said, leaning into her touch. "I was a man with everything and nothing until I found you in that storm. Now I have a family, a purpose, a reason to build something beautiful instead of just accumulating wealth." They stood together in comfortable silence, listening to the rain and watching the gardens that had become the backdrop for their love story. Tomorrow they would exchange vows under the gazebo where Damek had proposed, surrounded by the roses that had bloomed witness to their courtship. "Are you nervous about tomorrow?" Serena asked. "Terrified," Damek admitted with a laugh. "Not about marrying you. That's the easiest decision I've ever made. But about the adoption, about becoming Luna and Kai's legal father. What if I'm not good enough? What if I can't give them everything they deserve?" "Look at me," Serena commanded, waiting until his eyes met hers. "You've been their father since the night they were born. You've changed their diapers, walked the floors with them during teething, read them bedtime stories, taught them to walk. The paperwork tomorrow just makes official what's already true in their hearts. And if they ask about Knox someday, we'll tell them the truth, that they're biological. Father wasn't ready to be a parent, so God sent them someone who was. We'll tell them that families aren't always made by blood, but they're always made by love." Damek pulled her into his arms, holding her against his chest while rain continued to fall outside their window. "I love you, Serena Edwin. In 12 hours I get to call you my wife. I love you too, Damek Mace. In 12 hours we become a family in every way that matters." A crash of thunder overhead made them both laugh, remembering another storm that had changed their lives. But this time, instead of bringing uncertainty, the rain felt like a blessing, washing the world clean for their new beginning. "I should go," Damek said reluctantly. "Mrs. Whitmore will have my head if she finds me here breaking wedding traditions." "Wait," Serena said, catching his hand as he moved toward the door. "I have something for you too." She crossed to her jewelry box and retrieved a small wrapped package. Inside was a vintage pocket watch, the kind men had carried in their grandfather's time, with an inscription that made Damek's breath catch. "To my beloved husband and the father of my children. Time began the night you found us in the storm." It was my grandfather's," Serena explained. "The only thing my grandmother kept from her life in Iran. She gave it to me when I graduated nursing school and told me to save it for the man who proved himself worthy of our family's legacy." Damek opened the watch, and the soft chiming of a Persian melody filled the room, the same lullaby Serena's grandmother had hummed while teaching her poetry, the same tune Serena now sang to Luna and Kai at bedtime. "She would have loved you," Serena whispered. she would have seen your heart the way I do. I'll carry it every day, Damek promised, slipping the watch into his vest pocket. And every time I check the time, I'll remember that the best part of my life began the moment I found you. Another rumble of thunder punctuated his words, and they both smiled at the storm's perfect timing. Outside, the rain continued to fall on gardens that would host their wedding tomorrow, washing away the last traces of winter and preparing the world for the spring celebration of their love. After Damek left, Serena returned to her window to watch the rain and think about the journey that had brought her to this moment. A year ago, she'd been terrified, alone, and convinced her life was over. Tomorrow, she would wake up as a bride, surrounded by love and blessed with a future brighter than any dream she'd dared to dream. In their cribs, Luna and Kai slept peacefully, unaware that tomorrow they would gain not just a legal father, but the security of knowing they belonged to a family that would never let them go. And in the main house, Mrs. Whitmore was putting finishing touches on wedding preparations that would transform the gardens into something magical. The storm that had brought them together was passing, leaving behind clear skies and the promise of perfect weather for the most important day of their lives. In 12 hours, Serena Edwin would become Serena Mace, and 2 babies would officially become the children their hearts had always known they were meant to be. As she prepared for bed, Serena whispered a prayer of gratitude to her grandmother, to the universe, and to the mysterious forces that had brought her love in the middle of a storm. Tomorrow, under spring skies and surrounded by roses, she would marry her prince and begin the happily ever after she'd stopped believing in, until the night a broken man had proved that sometimes fairy tales really do come true. Chapter 10. Ever After begins today. The morning of Serena's wedding dawned clear and radiant, with sunshine streaming through her bedroom windows like golden silk and the scent of blooming roses drifting through the cottage on a gentle breeze. She woke to the sound of Luna babbling happily in her crib and Kai's determined attempts to climb out of his own bed, their sweet morning chatter the most wonderful alarm clock she could imagine. Today, she would marry Damek Mace in the rose garden, where they'd fallen in love, surrounded by the flowers that had witnessed their courtship and the friends who'd supported them through the storms that had tested their commitment. More importantly, today, Luna and Kai would officially become Mace children, gaining not just a father's name, but the security of knowing they belonged to a family that would never abandon them. Mrs. Whitmore arrived at the cottage before Serena, had finished her coffee, arms full of garment bags and flowers, her silver hair perfectly arranged and her eyes bright with the joy of someone who'd helped orchestrate countless perfect days, but never one quite so meaningful. "Good morning, bride," she said warmly, kissing Serena's cheek before scooping up Luna, who immediately began examining the pearl buttons on Mrs. Whitmore's cardigan with serious concentration. "Are you ready to become Mrs. Mace?" "More than ready," Serena replied, lifting Kai onto her hip and marveling at how much her life had changed since that stormy night 13 months ago. "Where's Damek?" Pacing the music room like a caged tiger and asking me every 5 minutes if you've changed your mind, Mrs. Whitmore laughed. "I finally banished him to his study with strict orders not to emerge until it's time for the ceremony." The morning passed in a blur of beautiful chaos. Serena's wedding dress hung waiting in her closet, not the elaborate gown she might have chosen in her youth, but something perfect for a woman marrying for love rather than show. It was ivory silk that flowed like water, with delicate lace, sleeves and a neckline that showcased her grandmother's pearls. Simple, elegant and perfect for a garden ceremony. Luna's flower girl dress was a miniature version in pale pink, with tiny silk roses sewn along the hem. Kai's little suit matched his soon-to-be father's, complete with a bow tie that he kept trying to pull off, despite Mrs. Whitmore's patient corrections. "You look like a fairy tale princess, Mama," said a familiar voice from the cottage doorway. Serena turned to see her former colleague, Elena, from the clinic, radiant in a blue dress that complemented her dark hair. Elena had become one of Serena's closest friends during the difficult months of pregnancy and had insisted on traveling from Chicago to witness the wedding. "Elena!" Serena cried, embracing her friend carefully to avoid wrinkling either of their dresses. "I can't believe you're here. I wouldn't miss this for the world," Elena replied, producing a small wrapped box. "Something blue from your maternity ward family." Inside was a delicate blue silk garter embroidered with tiny stars, along with a note signed by all the nurses who'd cared for Serena during her pregnancy, "For our brave girl who found her happy ending." As noon approached, the cottage filled with the gentle bustle of final preparations. Mrs. Whitmore arranged Serena's hair in a soft updo that showcased the antique pearl earrings that had been her grandmother's, while Elena helped wrangle the twins into their wedding outfits. "They're getting restless," Elena observed as Kai escaped her attempts to comb his dark curls, and Luna began fussing over her tiny shoes. "Maybe we should head to the garden." "Just a moment more," Serena said, standing before her bedroom mirror for one final look. The woman gazing back at her bore little resemblance to the scared, desperate girl who'd collapsed outside a clinic in the rain. This woman glowed with happiness and confidence, secure in the knowledge that she was loved completely and about to marry her best friend. "You're radiant," Mrs. Whitmore said softly, appearing behind her in the mirror. "Your grandmother would be so proud." "She is proud," Serena replied, touching the pearls at her throat. "I can feel her blessing on today." The walk through the gardens to the ceremony site felt like floating through a dream. The rose garden had been transformed into something magical. White chairs arranged in perfect rows, an arbor of climbing roses creating a natural altar, and petals scattered along the grass pathway like nature's own carpet. Their guests were few, but precious. Elena, Mrs. Whitmore, Damek's business partner Robert and his wife, and the minister who'd agreed to perform both the wedding ceremony and the adoption proceedings. Luna rode on Mrs. Whitmore's hip while Elena held Kai's hand to keep him from wandering into the flower beds. Then Serena saw Damek waiting at the altar, and everything else faded away. He stood beneath the rose arbor in a charcoal gray suit that emphasized his tall frame and storm-colored eyes, his dark hair gleaming in the sunshine, and his expression radiating pure joy. This was the man who'd carried her through a literal storm and then spent 13 months proving that love could conquer any obstacle. This was the father who'd chosen her children before he'd even known if she would choose him. This was her future, her forever, her heart's home. As the string quartet began playing the melody Damek had composed for her, Serena walked down the petal-strewn aisle, carrying Luna, while Kai toddled beside them, occasionally stopping to examine interesting flowers until Eleanor gently guided him forward. The music was the same haunting tune Damek had hummed the night the twins were born, the song that had become the soundtrack of their love story. When she reached the altar, Damek's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You're beautiful," he whispered, taking Luna from her arms and settling their daughter on his hip as if she belonged there, which of course she did. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, his voice carrying clearly across the garden, "we are gathered here today to witness not just the union of two hearts, but the creation of a family bound by love rather than blood, by choice rather than circumstance. The vows they exchanged were the same ones they'd written in their letters to each other during the darkest days of their legal battle, promises that had sustained them through every storm and would guide them through all the years to come." "Damek," Serena said, her voice clear and strong despite the emotions threatening to overwhelm her, "I promise to love you in sunshine and storm, in triumph and trial, in all the ordinary moments that make up a life together. I promise to be your partner in building dreams and raising children, your companion in growing old together. I promise to choose you every day for the rest of my life." Serena, Damek replied, his voice rough with emotion as he held Luna while Kai climbed onto his feet to be closer to the action. I promise to protect and cherish you and our children, to build a home where love is the foundation and laughter fills every room. I promise to be the father Luna and Kai deserve, to love them as fiercely as if they'd been born from my own heart. I promise to spend every day proving worthy of the miracle you've given me. When they exchanged rings, his grandmother's diamond, for her, a platinum band engraved with Persian poetry for him, Luna clapped her tiny hands while Kai babbled what sounded suspiciously like Dada at exactly the right moment, making everyone laugh through their tears. By the power vested in me by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the minister announced, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Damek, you may kiss your bride. The kiss was soft and sweet and full of promises. While Luna giggled and Kai tried to climb higher up his father's leg for a better view, when they broke apart, both of them were crying and laughing simultaneously, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the moment. But the ceremony wasn't over. The minister produced the adoption papers that would make Luna and Kai officially Damek's children, giving them his name and all the legal protections that came with it. Do you, Damek Mace, swear to love, protect, and provide for Luna Rose Edwin and Kai James Edwin as if they were your natural-born children, to be their father in every sense of the word for as long as you live? I do, Damek said firmly, his voice carrying across the garden with absolute conviction. I swear it. And do you, Serena Mace, consent to the adoption of your children by your husband, knowing that this will give him all the rights and responsibilities of parenthood? I do, Serena replied, tears streaming down her face as she watched. Luna reached for Damek's face, while Kai wrapped his small arms around his father's leg. With all my heart. Then by signing these documents, Luna Rose Edwin and Kai James Edwin become Luna Rose Mace and Kai James Mace, with all the rights and privileges thereof. As Damek signed the papers that made him legally the twins' father, Luna seemed to understand the gravity of the moment and went completely still in his arms, her amber eyes serious as she watched the pen move across the page. Kai, not to be outdone, added his own contribution by grabbing the pen and making enthusiastic scribbles at the bottom of the document, officially signing his approval of the adoption. Ladies and gentlemen, the minister announced with a broad smile, I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Damek Mace and their children, Luna and Kai. May this family find joy in every season and strength in every storm. The reception was intimate and perfect, held on the cottage terrace overlooking the gardens where their love had bloomed. Mrs. Whitmore had outdone herself with a menu that included Persian specialties in honor of Serena's heritage, while Eleanor regaled everyone with stories of Serena's pregnancy that made Damek alternately laugh and look horrified that he'd missed those difficult months. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Damek and Serena found themselves alone on the terrace, while their guests entertained the twins inside. The cottage glowed with warm light behind them, and the gardens stretched out before them like a promise of all the beautiful tomorrows they would share. Mrs. Mace, Damek said, pulling her into his arms for a dance to music only they could hear. How does it feel to be married? Perfect, Serena replied, settling into his embrace as if she'd been made to fit there. How does it feel to be a father? Like everything I've ever done was just preparation for this moment, he said, spinning her gently as fireflies began to twinkle in the gathering dusk. Like my whole life was just a story leading up to the night I found you in the storm. Speaking of stories, Serena said with a smile that held secrets, I have something to tell you. What's that? The doctors called yesterday with the results of my annual physical, she said, her eyes sparkling with mischief and joy. It seems that love really can work miracles. We're going to have a baby, Damek. Luna and Kai are going to be big siblings. Damek stopped dancing, his expression cycling through shock, wonder, and pure elation. "Really? You're sure?" "Very sure." Serena laughed, placing his hand on her still flat stomach. "Due in December, a Christmas baby to complete our family." "A baby," Damek repeated, his voice filled with awe. "Our baby, made from love instead of luck." "Are you happy?" Serena asked, though his radiant expression had already answered her question. "Happy?" Damek lifted her off her feet and spun her around until they were both dizzy with laughter. "Serena, I thought I had everything I could ever want, and now you're telling me we're going to have more. How did I get so blessed?" "We got blessed," she corrected, settling back into his arms. "All of us together, Luna and Kai and you and me and the baby who's going to grow up knowing nothing but love and security and parents who chose each other every single day." As they danced under the stars in the garden where they'd found their happy ending, the future stretched before them like an open book waiting to be written. There would be more children, more laughter, more storms weathered together, and more joy shared as a family. There would be teenagers and graduations and weddings of their own children someday. But tonight, on their wedding night, they were simply Damek and Serena Mace, dancing in their garden while their children slept peacefully inside, and their newest blessing grew quietly beneath Serena's heart. They had found their forever in each other's arms, had built their family from love and determination and the kind of faith that moves mountains. The storm that had brought them together was long past, but its gift would last for all the years to come. A love story that proved fairy tales really do exist for those brave enough to believe in magic and strong enough to fight for their dreams. And as the last notes of their imaginary music faded into the night, Serena and Damek held each other close and whispered promises to the stars, knowing that their greatest adventures were just beginning.